the demands of medicine are, number one, precision medicine is so important. We need to, we're in the age of very focused tools. It has to work like a drug. Number two is it needs to be standardized, that doctors and patients need to understand how a digital therapeutic works, and understand kind of the mechanisms behind it, so that a doctor, for example, can prescribe that as a solution. And the last one is personalization, which gets to your question, which is everybody is different and they want different things. So in order for music therapy to really be scalable and to meet the needs of a lot of health environments, it needs to be precise and standardized and personal. And up until now, honestly, that has not been possible in spatialized immersive kinds of digital technologies. So the big advancement of using spatial with something like HealthTunes is that it can react to the patient, it can react to our individual needs in real time, and it can modulate using something like biosensors and biofeedback. It can modulate in real time to what we need. If you take the example of one of the solutions that we're working on is birthing. And, a birthing process can go for a long time. And the needs change dramatically over the course of that experience. So in the beginning, you might want calming, and you might want different kinds of experiences enhanced with music and other kinds of sounds. And that, with a biosensor, we can help someone ride the wave across it. And then at the end, it's a very different environment. So we can use a real-time environment that is spatial. You don't have to wear anything to deliver an experience that modulates according to the needs of that therapeutic environment. Jump in here a second.
That's fascinating.
So virtual reality is based on a match with our sensory system. And it is a pre-conscious experience. And so the quality of the experience, the quality of the delivery device, really affects the core of the phenomenon of immersion. When things match our sensory system well, and that can be audio quality or visual quality, the closer the match to our sensory system, the more that the technology disappears. And ultimately, we want the technology to disappear because it interrupts. When you have poor quality, it interrupts the experience, the immersion. And so, number one, you need high quality in order to match our sensory system, and then you don't want to disrupt it. And that is essential in order to make these things, the technology work, the VR experience work.
Isn't there one caveat, and actually how you and I experienced, sometimes imagination is very powerful when we don't try to animate it so it's almost real. Sometimes, and we have been in that experience in VR, if there is more imagination from us needed, it is more powerful.
Yeah, and in building applications, so I worked on PTSD with the Department of Defense for soldiers, and a lot of you want to build ambiguity into this, or in a therapeutic environment, you want to build a space because it's interactive. You want to build a space for that interaction to happen. So we need to, as designers, leave a gap. What do I bring? How much of an experience do I bring? And how much space do I leave for that user to fill in and have a role?
That's the secret of music, I think, because it's all about imagination. It's like you find your imagination about feelings, and it's always your thing.
Absolutely. I remember the initial interviews we did, and we looked at motivation first. It was like, what brought you in to become a clinician? And hands down, every individual, it was to help people. it's that part of it. It's the delivering something that can save a life and, you know, change the course of someone's quality of life. Digital holds a lot of promise to help clinicians find that autonomy and that time back, right? So I think we're on a journey right now, and it's feeling difficult and it's feeling overwhelming. That comes across in the data that we have. But the rise of digital is here, and it's being seen and felt by clinicians from around the world. Almost 9 in 10, so pretty much majority of people that we surveyed said that being technologically savvy is incredibly important now in a clinician's role. So if you do not embrace tech, then I don't know if a clinician in the future will really exist, because you need to have technology literacy as a part of your DNA. The other thing was that tech literacy is only going to grow as an important skill set. And that comes out really strong in the findings. So what was some of your view around tech literacy, and how far does a doctor need to be digitally savvy? Because I think that's a question that a lot of people debate.
Yeah. I think early in the EHR evolution, so when EHRs were first coming out, and I remember when we were doing this at Hopkins in the 90s, and they were quite, you know, simplistic. I could get labs and I could make a note. It was basically almost like a contained word processor, except I could also look up labs. And those have grown, you know, more and more complex. And the tech literacy that is needed is certainly different now than it was at the beginning of EHRs. And so, and I'm only talking about EHRs here. There's other forms of technology. There's robotic surgeries and other kinds of technology, which of course is coming into healthcare all of the time. And so I think, but when we're talking about electronic health records or you know, software, you know, type of things coming into the workforce, I think it's critically important for physicians to understand how this technology works, what it can do, what it can't do, but more importantly, how to optimize its use in that moment, right? In the moment of care delivery. And in some ways, that means running into a lot of current limitations, right? Where we want to be able to give a voice dictation and perhaps have natural language processing or voice recognition, sort of take that on. And there's certainly advances there that weren't there before, but we're not quite at the point where you can untether from typing or clicking. Although the vision might be eventually to untether clinicians from a desktop or a laptop or a device, we're not quite there yet. And so I feel like we're in this point where technology is going to be critical for clinicians to understand, and they do have to understand how to navigate through them and how to optimize it for their particular situation, for their particular clinic flow.
And yeah, go out there and do it is the language. I mean, that for me is the most fascinating thing. Conversations, since I work in research, conversations I've been having for years happened overnight. Aspirations people had for decades in their career happened at some point overnight. So one of the things on my mind as you were speaking was like, what's going to stay? So with all the changes, there's so much that you've done, and I'm sure you've learned so much, and it could still be a conversation that's happening. So I'm not holding you to anything. But what elements do you think will stay?
Well, I think not only, I think what will stay, what's demanded, what's reimbursed. I think one thing that's we're learning about now is not only the technology that we are capable of performing, but we're learning about more how patients and our own staff demand these technologies, right? So this has been a test case for patients and how they will choose now and will choose to reach out for access healthcare in the future. So I think and we're seeing that, not only are we rolling out telecapable healthcare visits, but our patients are benefiting from that care, and they are, as the end user, identifying for themselves the benefits of this, and that will really, I think, have a big impact, a huge impact on reshaping what technologies will gain more traction than others.
No, I really like that. What's demanded will stay. Big believer of it. And I do think it's on both sides, right? It's what the clinicians are finding useful and have utility towards, as well as what consumers and patients are coming up with to say, I really want this. When we think about technology, and you talked about a lot of things around, with COVID Watch, people be able to kind of triage, people be able to access their data and then information. But one thing that we talk about quite often at Reach is about equity. And I think tech equity is a whole other space that we have to keep in our lens, because like the examples you gave was so good, but there's definitely going to be groups of individuals that could not access those tools at the same pace or the same level or in the same language, and therefore they were missing out. So how is this a conversation that you're having within your order?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to kind of cross-check that technology needs to work it needs to streamline care, it needs to improve care, it needs to be helpful to the end users, both providers, hospitals, centers, and patients and families. And I think it's so important for stakeholders to be involved in development of technology and understand its benefits and constraints. I just, not to throw another COVID example, but look at the monumental effort that the globe, our country, has performed in getting as many people vaccinated in as quickly amount of time as we've done. But very early on, we identified the barriers of vaccine hesitancy, right? And we saw, talk about health equity. It was clearly evident that there was a disparity in vaccine hesitancy among race, ethnicities, and age, and professional and types of professions that people worked in. But what we also learned very quickly is the technology that we set up to allow people to access the vaccine was very elusive to some that weren't tech savvy. So a lot of these enrollments for the vaccine were email-based, web-based. There was no walk-in, call up to make an appointment. And I just need to look at my own, my mom in the struggle in trying to get her to schedule for a vaccine. And it was just nearly weeks. It was just impossible for her. And I, finally got involved. It was difficult for me. So I think we have to recognize, sometimes we take for granted that everyone has a smartphone. And the truth is, smartphones are $1,000 devices. The subscription is very expensive. Not everyone has them. Not everyone has the ease of mobility in using them. And so I think that's where, we talk about health equity, but within the technology is also implemented, we also have to cross-check how equity can be impacted by the technology we're trying to implement and the unintended consequences of that innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? As more things go direct to consumer, as more individuals can get competitive pricing, talk to me a little bit about that. How does that play out? Does that mean, because that's risky, right? Because a lot of tech today is direct to consumer. So those individuals that can afford it, that have access, that are able to have the health literacy is huge, to understand what they need, are getting what they need. But the gap is therefore getting bigger, much like you just said, around COVID, exacerbating the gap. So how does that play out at a state level when you're in your role? Would you see things start to move more to the consumer and therefore the state would kind of scale back?
So I will say the promise of it is there, meaning more direct and personalized options, for individuals. So the promise is there. But I am not sure, and I will argue on the grand scale that we need it. that the devices, that the tools, that the options are not there where they're needed the most. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when innovators come in this space, they assume that we're all connected. But I just affirm to you on a rural and an urban basis where there are economic challenges, that that is not the case. That we do have a challenge when it comes to affordability, when it comes to infrastructure in the ground. There are critical challenges that remain, that I don't know if the innovators that you interact with on a regular basis, that they see that they take that into account, that they take into account the inequities that currently exist, the biases that currently exist. Do they take that into account when they are on the drawing board coming up with that concept? When they are designing, do they have those persons in mind? Do they have the people, again, that might not have the digital skills that are innate, or that are second nature for them? A lot of people need technologies and can benefit from being connected the most, are not digital natives. So, are we from inception to market really taking into account not only their needs, but what your, as an innovator and designer, where your next $1 million will be made? Your first millions might be made from the digitally connected. You're leaving a lot of opportunities on the ground, and our country is not benefiting robustly from a digitally connected health future if you don't think about the rest of us that are not currently a part of this grand scheme, that cannot afford today, because the government is putting its thumb on the scale. $100 million plus is going to each state over the coming years through the states. Those legislators, those broadband officers are going to have a lot of power and influence. Are you, as an innovator, ready? Had you thought about those who need these services? Have you challenged the government to come up with concepts and models that would incent you economically to not only invent, but to make a part of your design these individuals? Because if am using your device and you can't see me, and I've had that to happen in the earlier stages of AI and facial recognition, then there's a problem. I am invisible, and you're leaving on the table a lot of money and a lot of opportunities, and you're further disadvantaging me if you don't see me, if I was not a part of your protocols and design, if I'm not part of your studies. If I am invisible, you could be actually harming me more. Because if the marketplace or my clinician decides to adopt these standards or your concept, and you absolutely did not have me in mind, then what type of care am I going to get going forward? So I'm saying all that to say that from a government point of view, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and from an all of the above point of view, we need to say and to ask ourselves, what role do we play in a digitally connected future? And are we looking at every opportunity, every market, and every characteristic needed, so that all of us can be improved by your invention?
Yeah, I mean, early buy-in is so key, and I think that's something that you've demonstrated. Senior level buy-in, of course, but then clinician buy-in too, right? And time again, I hear from clinicians, various specialties, telling me that, well, they're just pushing something on me, or there's this new system, and all they're hearing is, I have to learn a new system. They've not been involved, they've not been a part of it, and I know that's not easy, and it depends on the institution, but I do feel like that's a huge area that you are advocating for, and part of that is you bringing clinicians forward through Innovator MD, So I want you to share more about, I mean, how did Innovator MD come about? Please tell people what it is too.
Sure.
And yeah, I want to get into the role that you're playing in helping clinicians have their voice heard.
So you made a very good point about being pushed on physicians, right? Things are being pushed on physicians. What if the physicians actually create those systems? They understand physicians' thinking, they understand the problems that they are facing in their practice, right? And if they come up with the solutions, those solutions are much better accepted by other physicians, by the rest of the system. Now, if you think about, physicians are, at the top of their knowledge, right, and skills in a healthcare system. But generally what happens is, you're using physicians as just frontline workers. um, Physicians are great because they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills. They spent years focusing on a particular specialty, and so they have a lot of experience. But if you're using them just for the front end jobs, what you're missing is that the solutions that they can come up can help the whole system do better. And that's where, when I got out of Kaiser, I was thinking about how can we help these physicians who are coming up with ideas and solutions to the problems that they see firsthand. How do you help them learn how to do innovation? How do you help them expand their idea? How do you help them bring support to those ideas? And the good ideas could actually be a commercial product, where, or a company, a startup, where, you can build and expand and bring visibility to those solutions. And that was the idea behind Innovator MD. And I started Innovator MD about 3.5 years ago to actually teach and inspire physicians to innovate, and also help them, bring ideas to the market, where they become a commercial entity. How do you get investments? How do you get co-founders? How do you build the technology, and how do you market it and get customers? And so I created this entity, Innovator MD. It's a community of physicians and other supporters of physician innovation coming together as an ecosystem for startups.